The Saturday my son-in-law held up that old pocket watch and laughed. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my coat, walked to my car, and drove home in the dark. The next morning, I called my attorney. "Sylvia," I said, "start the process. All of it." She paused. "All of it, Evelyn? Every single piece? I want to tell you what happened. Not to make myself look good. Not to make him look bad, though he managed that entirely on his own. I want to tell you because I spent 63 years learning something, and maybe hearing it will save you some time. My name is Evelyn. I am 67 years old. For 31 of those years, I worked as a seamstress at a dry cleaning and alteration shop on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. Before that, I worked the floor at a fabric warehouse. I have been on my feet since I was 19 years old. My hands have the kind of wrinkles that don't come from age. They come from work. Needle pricks. Steam burns. The particular roughness of pulling thread through thick wool, over and over, 10 hours at a time. My husband passed when my daughter was 11. His name was Robert, and he was a good man, and losing him was the kind of thing you never fully recover from. You just learn to carry differently. After he died, I kept working. I kept saving. I kept our apartment on Fenwick Street because the rent was reasonable, and the landlord fixed things when they broke, and I didn't need more than what I had. My daughter grew up knowing that money was something you respected, not something you waved around. What she didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Robert had left me something unexpected. His father, a man I'd met only twice before he passed, had quietly invested in commercial real estate in the 1970s. Nothing flashy. A strip mall in a suburb nobody cared about then. A small warehouse outside of Dayton. When Robert's father died, Robert inherited everything, and when Robert died, it passed to me in trust. Our family attorney at the time, a quiet man named Sylvia's predecessor, advised me to say nothing and let it grow. I took his advice. For 3 decades, I let it grow. By the time my daughter graduated college, the trust was worth something that would have made your head spin. I am not going to say the number here because that is not the point. The point is that it existed, and it was hers eventually, and she didn't know, and I liked it that way. Not out of cruelty. Out of love. I wanted her to build her own life first. I wanted her to know who she was before she knew what she had. She did build her own life. I was proud of her. She became a physical therapist. She was good at it. Patient, attentive, the kind of person her clients asked for by name. She met her husband at a work conference in Chicago. His name is Griffin. Griffin Aldgate. He works in finance, something with investments, something he explained to me once using words I recognized individually, but not in the order he arranged them. He came from money, not trust fund money, but the kind of money that makes people comfortable in a way that becomes its own kind of blindness. His parents had a house in Dublin, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks like it was combed. They drove cars I didn't know the names of. They took vacations I didn't know existed. When my daughter brought him home the first time, I cooked pot roast. He ate it politely and said very little. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. People are nervous meeting a girlfriend's mother. I gave him the benefit of every doubt I had. The doubts multiplied slowly, over years. He called me the seamstress once to a friend of his, not knowing I was standing in the hallway outside the kitchen. He asked my daughter once, in a voice I was not supposed to hear, why I didn't do something about my apartment. He gave me a look, once, at Christmas. Just a look. Nothing you could point to, nothing you could say outright, when I gave my daughter a hand-embroidered quilt I'd spent 4 months making. It was a look that said, "That's it." I folded that look up and put it somewhere quiet inside me, and I kept going. They got married 3 years ago. Beautiful wedding. I wore a dress I'd made myself. Pale blue with hand-stitched detailing at the collar that took me 2 weeks to finish. Griffin's mother asked me who had made it, and when I said I had, she tilted her head slightly, smiled, and moved on. I understood then that some people cannot see the value in something unless a label tells them what to think. My daughter was happy. That was what mattered. Last spring, they announced she was pregnant. My first grandchild. I cannot tell you what that did to me. I cried in my car on the way home, the good kind of crying, the kind that comes out of a fullness in the chest that has nowhere else to go. I started knitting that same night. I had plans. I had been storing away things I wanted to give this child for years. Not things I'd bought, things I had saved. Things that meant something. One of those things was a pocket watch. Robert's father had given it to Robert when Robert turned 21. It was made in 1923. Swiss movement. Yellow gold case worn smooth in the places a hand naturally holds. On the back, engraved in letters so small you had to tilt it to read, "For the man you are becoming." Robert had carried it every day of his adult life. When he died, I wrapped it in a cloth and put it in the cedar box I keep on my closet shelf, and I had been keeping it for exactly this moment. The birth of our first grandchild, and then later, when he was old enough to understand what holding it meant. The shower was in April. My daughter's mother-in-law, Constance, hosted it at her home in Dublin. There were flowers everywhere, a 3-tiered cake, little name tags that said things like Guest of Honor's mother-in-law in gold script. I brought the pocket watch in a small wooden box I'd refinished myself, lined with the same blue velvet I'd used for wedding ring pillows years ago at the shop. I had written a letter to go with it, 4 pages. I told the story of Robert's father and Robert, and the years I'd spent keeping it safe. I told my grandchild, I wrote to him directly, though he wasn't born yet, that he was already loved by people he had never met and that this watch was proof. The gifts were opened after lunch. There were a lot of gifts. A stroller that cost more than my first car. A custom mural for the nursery. Gift cards in amounts I won't repeat because they embarrassed me. Constance gave a jewelry set in a velvet box with a store name embossed in gold on the top. Then my daughter got to my box. She opened it carefully. Lifted the watch out. Read the card. Her eyes went soft, and she looked at me across the room, and I could see she understood. Griffin was standing beside her. He took the watch from her hand. Not gently, the way you handle something old, but casually, the way you pick up a TV remote, and turned it over once, twice. He made a sound, a short, low sound through his nose, the kind of sound that says, "Really?" Then he said, to nobody in particular, but somehow to everybody, "How old is this thing?" His mother glanced at it. "Is it from an antique store?" Griffin handed it back to my daughter, and I watched his face in the half-second before he rearranged it into something more polite. In that half-second, I saw what he actually thought. "It's beautiful," my daughter said quickly. "Sure," Griffin said. He had already moved on, reaching for the next gift on the pile. I sat with my hands in my lap. I breathed. I smiled when people looked at me. I stayed for another 40 minutes, helped carry things to the car, kissed my daughter on the cheek, told her I loved her, and drove home. I sat in my kitchen for a long time that night. I wasn't angry exactly. Anger is hot. What I felt was cooler than that. Clearer. It was the feeling of finally seeing something you'd been half noticing for years, suddenly in full light. I thought about every small moment. The look at Christmas. The comment about my apartment. The way he never once asked me about my life or my work or Robert or anything at all, because to Griffin, I was simply not interesting enough to ask about. I was a seamstress on Fenwick Street who made pot roast and hand-stitched quilts, and that was all I was, and that was all I would ever be. He did not know about the trust. My daughter did not know about the trust. My daughter did not know about the trust. That had always been my plan. Tell her on her 40th birthday. She was 34. I had 6 more years to wait. But I went to sleep that night thinking about a child who would grow up in that house, raised by a man who handed back a 100-year-old pocket watch like it was something he'd found at a garage sale. I thought about what that child would learn about value and worth, and how to treat people who appeared to have nothing to offer. And I thought, I need to do something differently. I called Sylvia the next morning. Sylvia Marsh has been my attorney for 11 years. She is not flashy. She drives a sensible car and keeps her office in a building that looks like it was built in 1987, and nobody thought to update it. I like her very much. She is precise and she does not waste time. I told her everything. The shower. The watch. The years of small moments. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about her. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" I told her I wanted the trust restructured, not eliminated. I wasn't going to punish my daughter for who she'd married, but I wanted changes made that would protect what Robert's family had built. I wanted certain provisions put in place. I wanted my own name on certain things that had been in the trust's name for estate planning reasons. I wanted, in short, for nothing to be automatic anymore. Sylvia asked me if I was sure. I said I was sure. She asked me if I wanted to tell my daughter first. I thought about that for a long time. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see what he does next." I didn't have to wait long. In June, Griffin's company ran into trouble. I don't know the details. I'm not a finance person, but from what I understood through my daughter, some kind of deal had gone badly. Significantly badly. There were regulatory questions. I gathered that the word lawsuit had been mentioned, though by whom and involving what exactly, I never got the full picture. What I knew was this: by July, Griffin was stressed in a way that showed on his face whenever I saw him. And by August, my daughter called me on a Tuesday night and said in a very careful voice that they were thinking about some financial adjustments and wanted to talk to me. I asked her what kind of adjustments. She said Griffin had learned. She didn't say how, which I found interesting, that the property Robert's father had owned had appreciated significantly. She said Griffin thought perhaps the trust could be unlocked in some way to help stabilize things during this difficult period. I was quiet for a moment. Where did Griffin hear about the trust? I asked. She hesitated. He looked into some things. Looked into some things. I turned that over. Let me talk to Sylvia, I said. I'll call you Thursday. I called Sylvia Wednesday morning. She confirmed what I suspected. Griffin had done some kind of record search. Nothing illegal. The trust documents were part of the public record in a general sense, but the fact that he'd done it told me everything. For years, he had looked at me and seen nothing worth investigating. The moment his business had problems, he started looking. I wasn't surprised. I was, if anything, grateful for the clarity. Sylvia, I said, I want to move forward with everything we discussed in April. All of it. The trust was restructured over the following weeks. I won't bore you with the legal details because I don't fully understand them myself, and anyone who tells you they do is probably lying. The short version is this. My daughter is still protected. She will always be protected. But the structure now ensures that the assets are in her name specifically, in a way that is shielded from marital claims in the state of Ohio. She has full access. Griffin does not. If their marriage remained healthy and happy, she would never need to know the distinction mattered. But the distinction existed now. I also, finally, told her. I had not planned to do it that way. I had planned a quiet dinner. Just the two of us, maybe a letter the way I'd planned for her 40th. Instead, I called her on a Thursday afternoon and I said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down. I told her about her grandfather's real estate, about Robert's inheritance, about the trust, about the 30 years of silence, and why. I told her the number. There was a long pause on her end. Mom, she said. I know, I said. Why didn't you tell me? I said what I had always planned to say. Because I wanted you to know who you were first. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Is this because of the shower? Because of Griffin? I said. It's because of a lot of years of a lot of things. She didn't argue with that. I want to tell you what happened after that, because I think it's the part of the story that matters most. My daughter and Griffin did not split up. She made her own decisions, and I respected them, because she is a grown woman, and that is what grown women do. But something shifted between them. I don't know everything that was said in their house, and I don't need to know. What I know is that the following Christmas, Griffin sat across from me at the dinner table, and for the first time in 4 years, he asked me a question. He asked how long I had worked at the alteration shop. It was a small question. It might not sound like much, but I had been sitting across dinner tables from this man for years, and in all that time, not once had he asked. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, 31 years. He nodded slowly. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he said, That's a long time. It is, I said. I did not say anything else. I passed the rolls and changed the subject. I don't know what Griffin is now. I don't know if the question meant something or if it was performance. People can change, and people can also pretend to change, and sometimes you can't tell which is which until much later. What I know is that I don't need him to change. My daughter's life is her own. My grandchild. A boy, born in November, healthy and enormous and furious in the way all new babies are furious, as though arriving in the world is an outrage, is my grandson, and I love him without reservation. I gave him the pocket watch on the day he was born, not to Griffin, not to my daughter for safekeeping. I gave it to the nurse on duty, sealed in the little wooden box with a note explaining what it was, and I asked her to place it with his things so that it would go home with him. My daughter texted me that night, Mom. The watch? I'm crying. I texted back, good, that's what it's for. I still live on Fenwick Street. I still have the same apartment, the same landlord, the same view of the parking lot from my kitchen window. I retired from the shop 2 years ago, but I still take in alterations for people I like. I still make things with my hands. I still have calluses in the particular places that come from 31 years of particular work. I never needed Griffin to know what I was worth. I never needed Constance's approval, or the gold embossed box, or the 3-tiered cake. I built my life stitch by stitch, and I know exactly what it cost, and no one handing back a pocket watch with a look on their face is ever going to change that arithmetic. Robert's father engraved those words 100 years ago. For the man you are becoming. My grandson is 3 months old. He has a long way to go. But he comes from people who knew how to build things. And one day, when he is old enough, I am going to sit across from him and tell him exactly what that watch has been through and what it means and who held onto it and why. And I think that will be worth more than anything in a gold embossed box. I know it will. I've been thinking about what I would say here, at the end of the story, and I keep coming back to one thing. Nothing that happened was an accident. Not Griffin's dismissal at the shower. Not his sudden interest in the trust the moment his business started failing. Not even the small, careful question he asked me at Christmas. How long did you work there? That arrived 4 years too late, but arrived nonetheless. None of it was random. All of it was the natural result of choices, stacked one on top of another over years, until the stack became something that couldn't be ignored anymore. That's what I've learned at 67. Not a lesson from a book. Not something anyone told me. Something I watched happen in real time, in my own kitchen, at my own dinner table. The way a person treats you when they think you have nothing to offer is exactly who they are. And the way life eventually arranges itself around that truth, without drama, without anyone needing to engineer it, is something I don't have a clean word for. Not luck. Not justice, exactly. Just the quiet, patient logic of cause and effect, working on its own schedule. I kept Robert's pocket watch for 22 years because I believed it belonged to a specific moment. I was right, though the moment wasn't the one I'd originally imagined. It didn't go to a grown man who could read the engraving and nod seriously. It went to a newborn in a hospital bassinet who won't understand it for another 20 years at least. But that's fine, the watch kept. Good things keep, if you take care of them. What I want to say to anyone listening, and I mean this not as a lecture, but as something I genuinely wish someone had said to me earlier, is that your integrity is the only asset that doesn't depreciate. My hands got rougher over 31 years. My apartment never got fancier. The view from my kitchen window is still a parking lot. But the thing I built quietly inside myself, the willingness to work without applause and save without showing off and love without needing recognition, that compounded. It compounded the same way Robert's father's properties compounded, slowly and without fanfare, until one day it was simply undeniable. Griffin looked at me and saw a seamstress on Fenwick Street. That was a failure of his intelligence, not a fact about my life. The smartest thing I ever did was refuse to correct him. Not out of strategy, I want to be honest about that, but because I genuinely did not need him to know. I had already done the work. The work was already done. His opinion of it changed nothing. Evelyn, my daughter, said the night I told her everything, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Because I wanted you to know who you were first." That is the only philosophy I have. Not complicated, not borrowed from anyone, just the hard-earned knowledge that character is built before it's needed, the same way a pocket watch is wound before it's carried. You do the work in the quiet years, you keep winding, and when the moment finally comes, the moment that tests what you're actually made of, you find out whether all that quiet effort held. Mine held. I believe yours will too.